everyone. Welcome to another episode of Words of Heart. In today's episode, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Esther Onyoni.
Onyoni.
I was so close, and we were just saying it earlier, and I had it right then. I am so sorry. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Esther.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, Dr. Esther, if you could tell my listeners a bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. Yes, my name is Dr. Esther Onyoni. I am a pharmacist and I'm also a health coach for people living with diabetes. And it's not always been like that. So it's not always been like that. So I came to the United States after high school. But how I got to this topic is before that. I grew up in a family where there was a lot of arguments. My parents argued a lot. And just being a little kid, I felt like I was so small, I cannot intervene. I was trained to never intervene when adults are talking. I felt helpless. I felt like I did not have a voice in this matter. I remember when they took me to boarding school just so I could get away from whatever was going on at home and just focus on education. And that did not help either because I'm now alone in a boarding school and I'm scared of being picked on, being bullied. And so I just really learned how to hide in plain sight. I never spoke up. I never wanted anybody to know I was somewhere because it'll give them a chance to pick on me. And so this is something that I carried on into my adulthood, really, because as an adult, I noticed that I don't always speak up. And that's not necessarily how I noticed. It's more whenever I said something, I felt like I'm not being heard. I'm not, like my opinion did not matter. But when I analyzed it more, I noticed that I really don't ever speak up, and that doesn't really serve me because I had gotten to a point where I want to speak up, I want to say something, my thoughts, my ideas, and I wanted them to count and matter. And now I'm a parent, so I have to speak up. These kids need to hear me as well. They need somebody to speak to them, speak for them, so it's not speaking up was not serving me at this point. And so I found a way to get past that. The first thing I did was really recognize that I'm really not the kind of person, it's not a compliment to say that you're quiet. It's like you need to speak up because you have something to say that's helpful to somebody. And so I learned to really learn where does this come from. I noticed is that because I don't really prioritize myself, I'm always doing something to avoid a confrontation, to avoid being placed on a spot where I need to speak up. So it's something I needed to work on. And I did that by just finding a community of people who were doing kind of the same thing. They were like-minded. And so they cheered me on to where I saw that I could create space here and create boundaries and actually be able to speak up for myself and speak up for people around me. And so from there, I went on to create a consulting and coaching practice for diabetic patients, because here, as I practiced as a pharmacist, I saw that they too, the individuals that I served, were having difficulty in this area where they told me that the doctor did not hear them. They were on medication that they don't know why they're taking it. Just to help them see that they can have a voice and a matter in their own health, and just to see that they are able to be in charge of their health by implementing just lifestyle habits that are sustainable for them. So that's how I got to where I am now.
Wow. And I truly admire you for speaking up and helping others speak up, specifically in the diabetic community. For my listeners that you are already aware of, I am diabetic. So I do have, this is really close to my heart, us discussing this topic, because I feel like diabetics are just like everybody else, but we do have a voice and it should be heard and recognized. I feel like it's not recognized enough in my own personal perspective. Dr. Esther, you can help elaborate on that, I'm sure.
Uh, Definitely, I believe that there is that because after all, if you go to the doctor and they diagnose you with diabetes, you don't necessarily know what to say or ask. You're already needing to absorb that. It's like a shock. Like, oh my goodness, because what we at least are told about diabetes is that now you have the diagnosis, it's just going to progress and it's not going to get better. So you don't have a lot of people telling you that it's something that can be reversed or something that can get better. And even in my training, yes, that's what we were trained, that you manage the condition by definitely giving them medication or making sure that the patients take their medication, yes. But the training did not go beyond that to say, okay, so what happens when you have reached your goal? When you've gotten your numbers under control, now what? What we see a lot of these people get off the medication because now the numbers look normal, but then the condition comes back, or they just wait and then it comes back. And what I sought to do after seeing what a lot of individuals were struggling with is to step out and tell them that there is actually more that can be done, and it's not just what the doctor says. I noticed that there were individuals on just a lot of medications, and each time I saw someone, and after practicing for a while, it's more, you see more of the same people, and you have to start wondering, is this getting better for them? So you kind of ask them about their health further, to inquire. And what I saw was that they're constantly coming in with more medication, but is this getting them better? And that's what worried me, because I thought, okay, that's not right, because now they're taking another medication. Now they need something to help them go to sleep. On top of that, they need something else to help them be able to stay awake. Like, when are we going to hit the reset button? So it was constantly medication, and I just didn't feel comfortable at one point. I thought there's got to be something else here for this person. What else do they need to know? And then, or maybe even when they were given medication and not taking it because they're worried about side effects. I mean, because we go on Dr. Google and Dr. Google say, okay, there is a side effect to this, and then they stop taking it, but they need to control their condition. And now they start figuring out what other lifestyle habits to implement, or even once they've gotten the diagnosis and they say, I don't know what to do, now they just go into overwhelm and not do anything, get their condition worse. And so these are the kind of observations I saw. And so I trained as a health coach to just see that I can do more for these clients, these individuals. And that's how I started talking about, individuals being burned out when they have diabetes, because it's just endless, it's nonstop. You have to constantly take care of, on top of your regular routine. Now you're having to juggle taking care of yourself by checking your blood sugar regularly. Now you have to make sure you have your supplies, your medication, your doctor visits. Now you have more of those than before you were diagnosed, let's say. And not only that, your results can be discouraging. You do everything that you've been told to do, but your numbers are up there and they're all over the place. Or even just being overwhelmed from having to do so much. You got to decide what you're going to eat. Before it was an effortless thing, and now is this the right thing to eat. Maybe you don't even know. And so these are the things that I noticed that are affecting my patients. And just off the charts, no one wants to be unmotivated to live a good life. And so when people are burned out, they actually give up and feel like they quit taking care, and they quit taking care of themselves. And that's not where you want to be when you are someone with diabetes, because the condition still continues. And so that's how I got to how I got to where I wanted to just talk to people who are burned out and they were diabetic, because there's definitely more they could do. It just are at the point where they are unmotivated, but we need to get the motivation back.
Right. And speaking from my own personal perspective, because I am diabetic, I've been diabetic for about a year now. I got diagnosed at the start of the pandemic, which is a heck of a time to be diagnosed with a health condition when there's a life-threatening virus going around. I did take it as a positive and a blessing. Many people responded differently towards that, but I saw it as God's way of giving my life more purpose and giving me a chance to live my life again. Because in your field, I'm sure you're familiar with the symptoms prior to being diagnosed, if I'm not mistaken. If I hadn't been diagnosed when I did, I think my blood sugar was like 1400 or something when I got admitted to the hospital. It was like off the charts or something. I may be rating the number, but I know it was off the charts because I was literally on the brink of death if I hadn't been admitted to the hospital when I was. And even though I do see it as a blessing, in God's way of giving my life more purpose, and a huge contributing factor to how this podcast was created, it is an overwhelming change, because you went from, and this is just me talking here, I went from being basically a skeleton to now actually gaining some more meat on my bones again, to now trying to like find a healthy compromise between not being a skeleton and having a normal weight, as opposed to actually being too chubby. So as far as the weight transitioning and trying to find that right balance, and also of course everything with the food and the blood sugar plays a factor, that's been really overwhelming for myself personally. And I haven't gone into that mindset of giving up, because that's not an option, because hey, I wouldn't be here if I were to do that. So I was wondering if you could touch a bit on how from your professional perspective, what advice you give your clients if they're trying to help with their weight in regards to their diabetes.
Okay, so yeah, oh my gosh, it's a balance for sure to look for, because it's a mix. I mean, okay, what we hear a lot about is being told, okay, you're diabetic, you need to lose the weight. But it's not always lose the weight. There are people who are not overweight and they still have diabetes. What happens is that there is maybe a gene that's been activated depending on what they have done around the environment, something that has triggered it where they are now diabetic. So it's not always lose the weight. There are people who actually have diabetes and they're not overweight. And that's a tough one, because they're kind of given the same directives, eat lower carbs or reduce fat, whatever. It just doesn't work. And for those people, and for actually everyone who's diabetic, it's about being consistent about doing something. And for those people who are not overweight but they're diabetic, they are more, the kind of exercise they need to do, their physical activity has to be different in order for them to have on some muscle so that they're not underweight. As far as keeping their diabetes under control, it's taking an effort of seeing what they're doing, just like even if they had they were a little bit overweight or underweight, it's just saying what they're doing that's affecting their numbers. You know, when your blood sugars are high, what did you eat, and what what did you do in terms of physical activity? What did you do to trigger it to be there, and maybe avoiding doing that? But to put on some weight, maybe the kind of exercise you do, it's not always cardio for everyone, it's different for everyone. So it also comes back to everything being individualized, because what we hear is more go to the gym and eat this and that, or get on whatever diet, but it's not going to work for everyone. It depends on where you are and what your body is doing. So yes, it's the kind of exercise that people who are underweight will have to do will be different from the people who are overweight. The kind of exercises they need will be different. And that's something we learn as we go, because we were not trained that. Your doctor was not trained that. And even when the ADA or whoever the diabetes associations give you the guidelines, they're not necessarily saying, do this exercise for this person or do this nutrition for this person. They just say, watch your diet, watch your exercise. So you have to work and to a point where you have an individualized exercise that works for you. So yeah, it depends on where your body is. You'll have to take on different activities.
Awesome. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. How do you feel, and this is in regards to the pandemic, even though I survived being diagnosed with diabetes during this pandemic, fortunately, and I got vaccinated recently, yay. How do you feel diabetics or people in general are being affected by the pandemic, mentally speaking?
Mentally, oh goodness, who hasn't been affected? It's like all across. If you haven't been affected, it's like it's still coming slowly, because mostly because we don't really know when the end to this is coming. I'm excited about the vaccine. I have gotten my vaccine as well, and I actually immunize like on a daily basis people with COVID. With the COVID vaccine. And so what I have seen is they are very excited to have that, considering what the news media has put us in a point of panic, where it was at the beginning, it was more, if you're diabetic, you're at a greater risk. But some articles I've been reading recently were talking about, if the condition is really not under control, maybe then you're at a greater risk. But also if it's someone who is struggling with their weight. So like there is more than just diabetes. There's more other things that you're struggling with that would put you in a condition where you would be affected more with COVID if you were to contact the infection. But otherwise, I have also run into people who were diabetic and got past it. So it all goes back to what else are you doing to manage your condition. I think I'm very hopeful for people with diabetes, because what I've seen is, yes, they are open to getting the vaccine. They're very excited. Actually, at first, they called me and said, when is our turn? I have diabetes, I need to get the vaccine. And I commend them for, going after it and getting to it right on. But I would say that it's more if they would worry more if they have other underlying conditions. It's not just the diabetes. If they're struggling with weight, maybe then, yeah, they need to do more to manage their condition, just so they're not worried if they catch the infection.
All right. And just one more question before we get to the icebreaker question.
Okay.
What advice would you give those who recently become diabetic, specifically in their adulthood, when it seems like their life is finally together, like myself, and then have to undergo this drastic health change out of nowhere? What advice would you give those diabetics who have recently become diagnosed in their adulthood?
Yes. Okay. Actually, let me go back to your previous question. And I think you had asked me in terms of their mental status.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been affected. It's just not diabetics who have been affected. And what I've heard from them is they've also kind of given up on their condition, which is not the best thing to do at this time. But I know that when people are open to telling you that, they're also open to the idea of they're ready for change. They're getting close to going back to where they're able to keep things under control. Now, in terms of if someone is just recently been diagnosed, I have actually run into some people who have recently been diagnosed, and they're the way to handle it with the pandemic is to actually just have grace for yourself. First of all, there's nothing you did wrong. It's just that you've got the diagnosis. What you have to do now is to see what you need to do next. It doesn't always land like that because when you're diagnosed, a lot of times people are or tend to be or try to be self-sufficient, like, okay, I don't need to ask for help, I can do this. But this is not the time for that. This is the time to go, okay, I don't know what to do here. What do I do? Who do I ask? Who do I call? Because that's one way you're gonna progress in terms of helping your condition positively. If you go read everything on Google, it's too many ideas, too many things. They're not individualized to what your issue is. So it's not always the right answer for you. I know that people would run off and go start the keto diet or run into a lady who actually worked out twice a day. And I feel like that's just too much. So it's better to just ask, what can I do? Do the one thing that will be sustainable for you, not get overwhelmed and then do everything and then do nothing. So just take a deep breath, sit back and say, okay, where do I go now? And go for the one thing first.
Awesome. So I do have that icebreaker question for you. Many of my guests enjoy this question. It might stump you a bit, but I'm not entirely sure. If you could have any superpower that is not flying, you can't pick flying, even though many people are traveling. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I like to say reading people's mind only because I am an eternal introvert. And, I like to just go hide myself somewhere. And like after having an engaging time around the public, I just want to go home and just hide under the pillow, So if I could avoid all of that interaction and read your mind, I would be in heaven. But, I shouldn't have that superpower because it won't serve me well, but I would definitely wish I had that.
That is a good superpower, and that used to be my go-to answer when asking this question, but I have a new answer now. If I could have a power, I don't know if it's considered a power, but I'm sure it will be in the future, would be the power for this podcast to be heard across other galaxies that have yet to be discovered.
Oh, nice. Yes. We're headed to Mars. Maybe there's life there. We'll definitely have something to listen to.
Absolutely. Mars, space food, and this podcast.
Yes, and you'll be there. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Dr. Esther I want to say your last name correct before we wrap up here.
Onyoni.
Dr. Esther Onyoni. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Whew, I got it right finally. Do you have any social plugins before we wrap up here today?
Sure. I, as a pharmacist who stepped out of the behind the pharmacy counter to the front, I like to meet people, and I have a website called the Wellness Pathfinders, and that's where, I think that when people see beyond the medicine, they can believe that they can be okay. So that's why I called it the Wellness Pathfinders, because they can be fine. And that's my website. But then I can also be found on LinkedIn and on Facebook, where I hold a group called Kick Diabetes to the Curb, and I hold weekly Facebook Lives to discuss different topics, to give people ideas of other things they can do to manage their diabetes, while managing it with whatever medication they have. And, by the time they go to their doctor's visit, maybe the doctor will say, okay, you don't need that medication, but you know what? You're going to be okay because you know what to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Esther, for this wonderful conversation. And I'm like emotionally crying on the inside because this is such an important topic, because since being diagnosed, my whole perspective has pretty much changed, and it's changed for the better. And I just love the fact that we're touching on this. So thank you so much for this awesome conversation.
Thanks for inviting me here and allowing me to speak here. And just very excited and wishing you very well. And I'm glad that you're doing well.
Thank you. To all my listeners, stay healthy, stay safe, and special shout out to all the diabetic warriors out there. You are awesome. Please don't change a thing. And until next time. Bye.
Bye.